Well, welcome everyone to the Business Innovator podcast. So, the goal of this podcast is I really want to find the unsung heroes of business, right? In the age of social media, there is always such a pressure for everyone to be on social media, but there are people who are building businesses worth millions and millions of dollars in the background every single day who haven't always leveraged social media as a business. So, one of the key goals of the podcast is to meet people who've been building exceptional things and doing exceptional things behind the scenes. So my name is Aoife Roach, and today I have an amazing guest and we're about to have a fantastic conversation. So I welcome to the studio Earl Hall. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I want to talk a little bit, let's start with your background, right? So tell me a little bit about, because I know you were in the army and I know you've now transitioned from that. So give me a little bit of a background about your journey in the army and your journey into what's now entrepreneurship.
Well, a place that not many people have heard of, that was depicted in the Broadway hit Come From Away. I come from a small place called Newfoundland, Canada. In my day, not today, but in my day, one of the things that described where I'm from is that the fishery was falling apart, the oil was not yet found, and it was really a place where if you stayed, you struggled. And I'm so grateful and proud of the people that did stay. But at an early age, I figured that I had to get out. And getting out, when you come from a small fishing village with parents that did their absolute best with the limited resources they had, I didn't have a lot of options. I had the Army, I had the Coast Guard, I had the Canadian version of the FBI. There weren't many options. And I really lucked out. I got accepted to the Canadian version of West Point, which is called the Royal Military College. And that started off my journey to be here today.
And how long were you in the army for?
A couple of months short of 10 years.
Wow. And then where were you based? Did you stay in Canada or you moved around?
My home base was always Canada, and we moved around internationally to whatever drama was on the go at that point in time.
Very good. And what do you think is some of the lessons that you learn? Because you hear stories of the army and people, it's shaping you as an individual, right, with routines and habits. And tell me some of the things that you learned from being in the army and how that potentially shaped you into becoming the success that you are today.
Well, having an Irish mother, an Irish father, Irish grandparents, I'd say the army just reinforced certain things. One of them, the army teaches you endurance. So the ability to live with little or no sleep. So that automatically gives you an edge because a 12-hour day is an 18-hour day. A 5-day week is a 6 or 7 day week. So that I'm very grateful for the army to give me endurance. Number 2 is structure. You can't improvise military operations. If not, everybody will blow each other up.
For sure.
So learning methodologies, structures, how to be able to react and act with the 2 things we always use as the words that we had in the army. One is risk and the other is contingency. And that one's your left hand, the other's your right hand. And in the middle is the plan. So the ability to plan and execute. Number 3, there's an expression I absolutely love called God rewards effort and the bank rewards results.
Yeah.
Well, in the army, we learned that effort really didn't matter. It was just the result. But probably the thing that I still miss today is the camaraderie and the teamwork. It's something that you live with another human being that really you don't have any words for. It just becomes a wink or a nod in the civilian world. And you meet a colleague, like I met a colleague from the army 25 years later in an airport in Hong Kong. And within about a quarter of a second, it was like we'd never left each other 25 years before. So those things have really shaped who I am. I guess if you asked my team, they'd say I'm too intense. They'd say a whole bunch of crazy things that are true. But the army teaches you to be really the best of what you can be as a human being.
And there are so many parts of that I want to talk about. But just to the latter point, the intensity,
Yeah.
right? Because I get that from people, quite a bit, very intense, very direct. But I think you have to be, right? Especially if you're trying to spearhead an entrepreneur journey. And we're both in the AI space, and we will come and talk about that. Like sometimes we're building things and doing things that haven't been done or haven't been done in the way that they're currently being done. And you have to have that level of intensity because you're the leader.
The thing is that, at least for me, probably the greatest leadership lesson I've ever learned is lead by example.
Yeah.
So if you're doing it, they can complain. If you're not doing it and imposing it, you don't have any integrity.
Yeah, I agree.
So for me, it's all about, I'll never ask my team to do more than 70% of what I do. Because the extra 20 to 30%, it's because I'm the entrepreneur. So I do set the bar high, but I have to stay above it. That gives me the chance to lead, to coach, to mentor, and to shape them into who they'll be for their next challenge, because I readily understand that nobody can stay a lifetime next to me.
Yeah.
But I hope the trade-off of what I teach compared to what I ask gives them things that they carry on to build their future.
Yeah, it's it's the leading by example, right? Do as I do, not do as I say. And I really do try to integrate that into the business. But sometimes the habits I can have, which are long hours, I'm like, I don't want you to adopt this habit. Just because I do it doesn't mean that you should do it. And I think that leans into your point. So we go the extra mile because it is our businesses and it is what we're creating. But I want to touch back on some of the criteria. You talked about what you learned in the army. And I really like this, the plan in the middle, the risk and the contingency, right? Because I think that's very interesting, the way that you frame that. And how have you taken that and now applied it into as you would say, going into civilian life and going into creating and building businesses? Because that's really what it's. How much risk are you actually going to be willing to assume? What's your contingency plan in the the event of failure, and what is our plan to mitigate all of the risks that we don't end up in the contingency plan? So talk to me a little bit about, I really like that analogy.
So the thing is that, and I hit this wall every day with other people, that they make a plan and they think it's going to work.
Yeah.
Oh, they haven't watched enough TV, because one of the very first lessons I learned as a young lieutenant or lieutenant in the United States is that your plan all goes to hell once the first bullet is fired.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which means that plans are important, and revising them and revising they're important. But you have to spend more time on what are the risks of the plan. And I know this might touch a sensitive chord with the optimists. But as an entrepreneur, I can't afford to be an optimist. I have to be a realist.
Yeah.
And to be a realist, your life expectancy and your prosperity really depends on how deep, how many different scenarios can you make that are different risk scenarios, and what are you going to tag as a potential solution to that risk?
Yeah.
And if only 1 out of 50 shows up on the road, that's awesome. And that's the reason why AI is so important, because in AI, you can actually teach it to have, I don't want to say unlimited, but let's say 5,000 different risk scenarios and 5,000 different scenarios for contingency, whereas way too many humans will get fatigued after 2.
One of my mentors says all the time, when things go wrong, don't go wrong with it. But it is very easy if you haven't thought about these different scenarios to end up falling into a trap where, and then the overwhelm sets in, and then the anxiety, and then the panic, and then everything just goes to pot, right? But there's a mindset associated with that as well, about having enough confidence in your ability to assume risk, have a risk tolerance, but also in your ability to go, even if it does go wrong, I know I've mapped this out enough in my mind that I've thought you're probably not going to get all of them because, there's always going to be a curveball every now and then. But knowing that I have the confidence in my ability to be able to navigate whatever is actually thrown at me.
The analogy with golf, I love to death. It's something that I just keep in the back of my mind all the time. When you stand up at the tee and address the ball, and if it's, let's say, a par 4 for the fun of it, it can take you 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 15 tries to get into that little hole the size of a Coke can. Mm-hmm. But I have not seen many golfers in my career take the ball and put it in their pocket, go back to the cart and say, I'm done after 3 or 4. Yeah. You have to get it into the hole. And in other scenarios, people just give up. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you have the mindset that failure is only course correction, it's feedback. Mm-hmm. Giving up is what you don't want to do. Failure, who cares? Failure is the best thing can happen, and fail as fast as you can, because the better you get course correction, the faster you get to the result.
Yeah.
It's giving up that I have no respect for.
I think people underassume how complicated and how much grit and tenacity and determination it actually takes to be an entrepreneur or to be a business owner, to make payroll at the end of every month. And they underestimate that. But like, giving up is not the solution, because when you give up, then you just got to go and start again somewhere else.
And you'll face the same problem in a different form.
Exactly. And if you didn't learn from the failures of the first one, the likelihood that you're actually going to repeat those failures is pretty substantial, because you
at a higher cost.
Exactly. And the most expensive one, in my opinion, is the time. And it's the time wasted. When you do fail, right, which you will, it's inevitable. So you might as well absolve yourself of any anxiety that maybe I'll fail, because you're absolutely going to fail in some way, shape or form. But knowing that that's not the definition of who you are, it's just part of the process, because you can't have success without failure. And the more that you can learn from the failure, the more likely you are to be successful. And then letting go of the failure, I think, because sometimes people can get so tangled up in making it mean something about them as an individual or as a person. But if you can let go, okay, yeah, that happened. It wasn't great. I'm a bit embarrassed, about that happening. But being able to move forward. Tell me, in your journey, where do you think that you've seen challenges or failures, and how have you navigated them?
I've lived with failure every day of my life. Mm-hmm. It's probably the thing that I had to work the most on my personality. And out of all of the failures, probably the one that hurt the most, because I was least prepared for it, was leaving Newfoundland, Canada. The education system was relatively weak as compared to the rest of Canada. And when I showed up at the Royal Military College, things like calculus, algebra, had never seen these things. Mm-hmm. So I failed my first year of military college. And out of the couple of 100 years that the military college has existed, they almost never give the chance to the officer cadet to repeat. Mm-hmm. It's probably crazy to repeat a recruit year twice. But in my case, they hauled me aside and said, we think you could make it if you had another try at it. And first of all, I had to go back to Newfoundland, where, you leave the little island, you're the king of the heap, you're leaving in uniform. Everybody goes, oh my God, Officer and a Gentleman. That's a 100-year-old film reference. But going back with my head between my two knees as a ugly failure, that was a low point. Mm-hmm. Having to make the decision, was I going to go back, was even lower, because all of my colleagues had moved on to the next year, and they were the people that I bled with. Keyword bled. They're the ones that I bled with during that year, that they were moving on and I had to go back. which means every day in the mirror, I would be looking at that failure with them looking at me. But I had to do it. So spending 2 years as a recruit at the Royal Military College made me probably into the intense savage I've been accused of my entire career. But that failure haunted me for the longest while until I did a very interesting gratitude class. And I learned about a guy named Dr. Bruce Lipton, who wrote an incredible book called The Biology of Belief.
Okay.
That has proven that the vast majority of genetic disease does not exist. And when I was able to understand that I could program myself for gratitude for anything if I chose to, everything flipped. That was probably the greatest one, and probably the one that would equal that one is looking in my son's eyes when he was a young kid and tell him that he had to live in 2 houses. That one I'm still working on.
Yeah. So what sort of practices do you have in place? Do you do daily gratitude?
So for me, what I've programmed into my brain, because the brain is actually quite programmable if you feed it the proper things.
Exactly.
For me, it's not a daily practice. It has to be in the moment. So like on the way here, a car cut me off. If you were pumped up on sugar, pumped up on the wrong foods, didn't know how to breathe consciously, you might want to go into a mini road rage moment.
Yeah.
Whereas once I caught myself, as I started to get tense, went through a standard breathing practice and said thank you to the person, because that person might have changed the whole sequence of events from me getting in an accident in 4 lights. So for me, it's not a daily practice. The only thing I do practice, because Dr. Joe Dispenza really talks about Dr. Wayne Dyer's book, which was really the genesis of that point. When you're into the theta phase, when you wake up, and most importantly, when you go to bed. It's because it's what you take into the unconscious and the subconscious with you on your sleep journey. And when people want to get into spirituality, I'll say, no, if you're not spiritual, let's talk science for a second.
Yes. Yeah.
And gratitude is a note on the piano. It's the note C, to be very exact. It's the most important note on the piano. So it's like if you're sitting down and someone is singing off key, like my aunt used to, and the dog used to howl all the time because it was making his ears bleed. The thing is gratitude is a note on the piano. It's a frequency that you create in your thoughts first, that is biochemically sent to your heart and your lungs. And as you beat, that frequency just leaves the body out into the space that you own. So there's nothing really spiritual about it. It's just that most people don't know the scientific language to translate it into something that is an A plus B equals C.
Because oftentimes when I'm in, so I did it back in 2016, I did a certification with they were called the Natural Success Academy, and talk about alchemy and spinning lead into gold. And, and I did this, and I wrote a book, which was called How to Think Yourself Attractive, which was all about the metaphysical and really talking about that attractiveness is mental.
It is.
But when one of the biggest realizations I had during that process was I created all. Like everything that exists in my environment is a reflection of the frequency or the vibration 100%. That I'm on. And if I choose to shift that frequency and vibration, I can shift the reality that is in front of me. Because often people are like, this stuff always happens to me. And I'm like, you're creating that, but not everyone is open to understanding that we create, whether you create it positively or negatively, you own them both, and it's equal. It just depends on the thought process.
And if somebody said that in front of me, and I get in trouble for this stuff all the time, because like, I'm not really a friends-based person. I'm more of a teaching-based person. So if somebody says, this always happens to me, I'll go, yes, it always happens to you. And it will always happen to you because you're inviting it in. If they're not ready to take responsibility, I will say inviting it in, because it's trying to nudge you to a place that you deserve, that you're most probably scared to accept.
Yeah.
And that's where I find a lot of entrepreneurs, more and more, I'm finding entrepreneurs that are not afraid of failure. They're afraid of success.
Yeah. And that is also
It's mind-blowing to think,
Yeah.
but they're working 15, 18 hours a day to succeed. But subconsciously, they're afraid of
They have
success.
blocks.
Because when they were 4, 5, 6 years old, some nun or some Christian brother, making a reference from home, told them that they would amount to nothing. So there's this scar,
Yeah.
this genetic scar on on their DNA that's saying, if you succeed, it can't be you, because you're not allowed to succeed, or you don't deserve it.
Especially coming from an Irish background. But it was always, don't be a show off, right? Don't be too big for your boots. And there was always a sort of an undercurrent to not stand out, okay? And I had to do a lot of work. And then sometimes when I went into the fitness space, I think it was like the ultimate rebellion when I became a fitness model, because it was like, how much more exposed could I actually make myself? But it was like, I felt I needed to try to break that that conditioning that I had, that I shouldn't be seen, or I shouldn't be the one that wanted to command attention or wanted to stand out, that you should play small. Because even when I go back to Ireland now, the money, like I talk about money super fluid and easy. The more of it that we can earn, the better. But like, oh, you can't say that. You can't. And I'm like, why not? It's like the money conversation is another one, even to the point where I was always told money doesn't grow on trees. So then I bought a money tree, which you can buy. There's money trees on Amazon. It's in my kitchen. It's massive. Yeah. So every day.
Sometimes when I make a stupid purchase, leaves fall. And I just look at the tree and go, leave me alone.
So every day I look at this money tree growing and growing and growing. And it's like a subconscious messaging, because you don't really, unless you take the time to do the work and start to probe at these belief systems, because you don't realize you're being conditioned, because you know all of the beliefs are formed before the age of 6, and you sometimes you don't even know that that's what's actually going on.
Probably one of the, because I've spent the last 15 or 18 years doing like prolific research on these things, and probably one of the things that I found that is the hardest to scientifically quantify yet is that there's a 1-to-1 ratio between your ability to welcome and receive abundance and your self-love. And yeah, I know a lot of people that have stupid amounts of money that are very unhappy. It's because once you get to the point where you can buy anything,
what's left?
the only thing that you can't buy is how you feel about yourself.
For sure.
That has to be a lot of humility and acceptance, and a lot of forgiveness for things that really don't matter. Just letting go of it all.
I put a very strong focus on my own life in health and fitness and taking care of my body. But because I believe that is a direct reflection of self-love.
And it's the amplifier of your thoughts.
For sure.
So if you don't take care of your body, and let's say you're dreaming of a vacation, and you're thinking about it every day, and people say to me all the time, Earl, these mantra things, these sentences, they don't work. Okay, but you got to plug it into an amplifier. If you're having fast food every day, if you're drinking soda pop every day, you're talking into a dead piece of cloth.
Yeah.
It has to amplify out to be heard. Well, actually to be heard by yourself. But if it doesn't amplify, it does not manifest.
Yeah. And it has to be repeated, right?
Until you believe it.
Yeah, exactly.
It happens when you actually believe yourself.
I think people underestimate, there's a gestation period, right, between you actually saying what you want and then it materialistically actually being created in your environment. And it's that dedication and that commitment to still continuing on your path in the absence of results with the blind faith that you know it's going to happen is really where I see a lot of people sometimes they're like, they just give up.
Well, we're in an ADHD culture, and
For sure.
all my research has pointed to Twitter as the genesis of this. Because if it didn't fit in 28 characters in the beginning, and if you couldn't spin it with your thumb, it didn't exist. Like, if you look in media, news cycles used to be weeks. Now they're minutes. So the thing is people go, okay, I'll say this mantra twice, but it has to drop out of a trap door somewhere. Whereas if your food, if your water, if your conscious breath techniques and your exercise are optimal, in other words, you have the 4 pillars, then in the middle of that box, you have a place where you have very ionized or very electric thoughts. Then, of course, the speed can be faster if you truly believe. But when you really probe somebody on something they want, you've got to get past what Einstein would refer to as the id. You've got to get into what I love to call their ego, even though everybody hates that word.
It's true.
Are you doing this to fuel self-love, purpose, the future of the planet, or anything good? Or you just need this because in 6th grade, you didn't have it?
Yeah.
And you felt like you were out of the gang and you want to go back and show it off to check that box. The chance that you get it is low. And if you get it, the cost of it is going to be much higher than you'd ever believe. So you've really got to check and see what's the why of why I need this. Because if the why fuels the overall master plan, it'll happen if you don't give up.
Yeah. Social media, especially like when you're looking at videos and all of these, and we talked about the difference between influencers and thought leaders. It feeds the ego, right? To the, attention and impressing people, even to the point where so much stuff is falsified, right? In the pursuit of the ego's pursuit to make it look like it's creating success, where a lot of the success, the real success that I see, something that's very silent. I want to be rich in silence. Even though I run a social media marketing agency and I get it and I have all of these things and I know I should do all of these things, but I really have to work hard to actually do it, because even though I know I have to do it, but because I see what happens to me when I'm always doing it, and I see how I can fall into that ego state very easily, where I get concerned or consumed with vanity metrics, which really don't mean anything. And that can often derail me from the true vision of actually what I want to create. So what are your thoughts on with entrepreneurship? And because we know we need social media, right? It's an integral part of business. It's a natural extension to get the brand awareness and the exposure. But how do you recommend entrepreneurs balance not allowing the ego to become out of control in the pursuit of a vanity metrics versus building personal brands and business brands?
Well, for those that have had multiple businesses, success for me has always boiled down to only 2 metrics. One is authenticity and the other one is trust. So I won't say that I have a great relationship with a lot of our clients, but they know that at 11 o'clock on a Friday night, I'm holding my phone. And if there is a problem, they know that I'll wake up the entire parish, to make a religious joke. But I'll wake up the entire tribe if I have to make sure that that client knows we're there and that we push through the problem to get to success. So where I nudge people, and, I've called up entrepreneurs that I care about and say, take that LinkedIn post down.
Yeah.
And, I have the diplomacy of a tank in reverse. So I'll come right out and say, take that down. That's not who you are. What are your clients going to think? That's the wrong perception. So if you give it the authenticity, and I post things that are stupid and crazy and all that on LinkedIn, but it's the real me.
Yeah.
And you've got to have the humility to I posted something a couple of weeks ago and it got immediate crazy traction. But 10 minutes later, I had a sick feeling in my stomach, so I deleted it. But I got it out of my system, so I'm not saying don't do it. Vomit it out. Get it out there. But have the self-awareness to say, I'm glad I did it. I got it out, but get rid of that now because it's not who I am and where I'm trying to go as a human.
Yeah.
I only have one type of social media now. When the folks out in California announced ChatGPT was coming about 2.5 years ago, maybe 3, I deleted everything I had, and I had a lot of followers on Instagram and a lot on Facebook because that's where I used to post all of my human behavior research.
Okay.
And I deleted everything, and I focused everything into a very tight LinkedIn profile so that once AI is creating credibility scores, integrity scores, humanoid scores, and all those things that are coming, I wanted to make sure that I had one singular place to project the best version who I think I am instead of being sporadically spread all over the place. So the advice that I would give to entrepreneurs is you got to pick one spot, and it has to be the spot where people are going to buy from you because they know, believe, and trust you. And you're like, you look at somebody's LinkedIn and they're wearing a tie. You go over to their Facebook and they got the cap backwards with no teeth and
there's no
missing their
consistency.
sleeves of their shirt and whatever. And you're going, who the hell
Who
is
are
this person?
you? Yeah. Your LinkedIn is like your digital business card, and it is often, in many cases, the first introduction that people actually get to you. And they say we judge people within 7 seconds of meeting them. But if you have a LinkedIn profile that's not reflective, or like you said, which I think is nearly worse, where you have one version of you here and then you have another version of you. And I get that people can do many, many things. However, you do have to be consistent in, who you are and what you do. And when I did a lot of the fitness stuff, and even yesterday, believe it or not, I was actually looking on my Instagram and I was archiving a lot of the fitness videos because that's not who I am anymore. I'm not like I had a lot of success in the fitness industry. I did very well in it, but it's not who I am anymore. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I don't want, because now we've very much gone back into the corporate and into the AI space. I don't want people getting confused because people can and they judge. So you have control of the narrative on your social media channels of how you want to show up. And like we talked about, I recommend show up authentically. Right? Don't show up as somebody else, or don't show up what you think people want to see. Because you're not going to have a long runway with that because you're going to get exhausted by being an imposter.
What a lot of people might not realize that in today's world, like let's somebody applies for a job where I hang out with my team. I'll scan every single thing I can find on them on the internet. I'll look at their pictures on Facebook because most people don't put their pictures private. They'll have albums that are public.
Yeah.
They'll forget to close off tagging by a friend. So by the time they even show up in the office, I have a perfectly valid opinion of who they are. And now it's their job to prove they are that person or that they're not that person. And unfortunately, it's usually the latter. We left religion for a whole bunch of reasons. Like a whole bunch of people ran away from religion because you were being oppressed, because you weren't allowed to have an opinion, because you had to be something you're not. Like we used to say at home where I'm from, you had to kiss the ring, if that makes any sense, because the priest used to wear a ring.
Yeah, for sure.
But now the two scientific terms for this are herd theory and dominant theory. But now, instead of being subordinated to your local parish priest or whatever, or your local rabbi or whatever, now you're subordinated to some invisible ghost on multimedia or on social media that will give you 600 likes instead of getting 40 likes. So now you're measuring your self-worth in real time by the absolute random curve of are you somebody or not?
I know.
It's absolutely preposterous.
Yeah, and that is a real painful truth and reality, right? People's self-value intrinsically starts to get tangled up in the vanity metric.
The day that, when I get comments from people that they've figured out the hidden code of social media, it excites me to no end, because the value of social media is you have a non-judgmental window to the world to be your unique, authentic self. So that's flipping the script on it, where people think that you're supposed to post something that will please others. That's the toxicity of it.
Yeah.
But when you use it to publish your genius, and what most people don't understand is that the person that you've inspired the most is the person that's not going to like or comment, because usually they're too embarrassed or ashamed.
Yeah.
So the posts that I get the least traction on, I know they're the posts that hit the hardest. Does that make sense? And the mundane posts that everybody identifies with and gives me a little like, well, they're probably the break to get some feedback from the system, which I appreciate. But you have to have the mindset that our generation has been offered a window to the universe that no generation has ever had before, that we can send out a message that somebody will capture in Guatemala, Paraguay, Indonesia, that might change their whole trajectory, but you're never going to get a fax back from them saying thank you. And that's where we've got to learn to get the thank you inside.
Yeah.
Goes back to gratitude.
Yeah, I agree. So tell me, just I just want to touch on your business and what you're doing in the AI space.
We set out, so it goes without saying that the land-based casino industry, which is much different than online casinos, much different than sports betting, the land-based casinos have two inherent weaknesses. One is the facility to launder money, and the second one is there is a very easy path to addiction. So about 12 years ago, I was asked the simple question, how do you solve that? And considering my background in data, technology, all the way back to when I was a really young kid, my answer was, it's quite easy. The gaming industry has to go cloud. It has to go cashless. And by going cloud, that means big data. You can't be in the cloud if you're not accumulating massive amounts of data. You can't go cashless unless you've shown who you are by an ID card, a passport, or something like that. So by going cloud and by going cashless, you set the stage for the AI world. We all thought in 1999, when e-commerce was picking up, that AI would come much faster. I'm talking 2008, 2010. But we had the market crash in 2008. A whole bunch of things happened. But we always knew AI was coming. Since the early 1960s, we knew it was the solution. So when we started out Access.ai, our problem was twofold. And our solution was very, very exciting. We could eradicate money laundering. We could eradicate addiction. And we could triple, quadruple, and even higher than that, increase revenue. Why? Because every other industry besides, and I'll use the dirty word, gambling, have implemented CRM, customer relationship management strategies, to dramatically increase the revenue. But the land-based gaming industry still lets people walk in completely anonymous. Are they a risk? Are they not a risk? Who are they? How much are they spending? Are they going to come back? How much is it going to cost to bring them back? So if you get rid of the negative, the upsides of the positive are absolutely crazy. So even though nobody believed this back then, we decided to create an ERP, an enterprise resource planning system. So in other words, a casino management system.
Okay.
But instead of being on-premise, which is the scariest thing in 2024 from a cybersecurity point of view, because it has more holes in it than a wall in Baghdad. But We created a cloud management system. We created all the cashless technology. But the most important thing that's still really not cool in the world we live in is we created a structured database to prepare for AI. Because AI is only two things. It's mathematics, that's been around for 4,000 or 5,000 years. And the other part, the fuel, the gas, the food, the M&Ms in my case, that's data. And data, there's only one way to do data, and that's the right way.
Yeah.
And that's why we started out Access, because we knew the land-based gaming industry. Because online gaming was becoming very profitable. Sports betting was starting to get organized. But the land-based gaming industry was still the wild, wild west. And we knew it was not sustainable over time. So we started out a little tiny company. Canadian government jumped on board. Canadian banks jumped on board. Some famous people that I don't want to mention here because they don't like to be mentioned jumped on board. And we created this little small company with one caveat. And this is where the entrepreneurs, I hope they like this part, because to have a real healthy AI-driven database, your data needs to be heterogeneous. In other words, the more pieces of data that are different from the other, the healthier your database. So instead of having 40 clients in one country, myself and another guy, we ran around the entire world to 40 countries and found one client.
Oh, interesting.
So from the very beginning, like we had a client in Ireland. I love their Macau Gaming Club. Love those guys out in Cork. There's clients all over the world feeding this database so that we could learn how to train it to be ready that when the AI phase of the planet showed up, that our database was ready to rock and roll. So why we exist is to, one, get rid of all of the fines. Like if you look at Australia, we're not talking about $100 fines. They're getting $400-500 million fines for violation for money laundering. Same thing happened in England last year. Responsible gaming fines are going through the roof. So that's coming in. We wanted to be cloud so that we manage cybersecurity. Our clients don't even have insurance policies. They don't need them because we take care of the cybersecurity. So we ran way ahead of the pack to get ready. And the greatest gift I've been given in my entire entrepreneurship career was that the shareholders knew that it was going to be a 10-year run for the world to catch up to us. But when it caught up, it would turn very rapidly. And now that we're having cybersecurity incidents everywhere, we're getting these phone calls going, so how do you manage that? Well, you don't manage it. That's what blockchain is for. You just encrypt it, and they can't decrypt it. So probably the thing that I would love for every entrepreneur to hear is it's good to have dreams, but you need a plan. And you need a plan that's financed by cash flow.
For sure.
And once you have the dream, the plan, and the cash flow, then you get to first base. And first base is the team. Then once you have the team, it's all about being able to survive until you're right.
I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please make sure that you comment, give it a like, give it a subscribe, and give us a review. That helps us to get more traction, get in front of more people, and share the message that, you know, entrepreneurs' success is not linear. It's a process. And my goal here is to bring guests who really add enormous value with their length and breadth of experience.